My name's Lauren Rea. I'm a lecturer in Latin American Studies in the School of Languages and Cultures. And I study popular culture in Latin America. Because if you want to understand the history of nation building in Latin America, a really good place to start is with what people read or watched or listened to. And then you can start looking at the motivations behind those cultural products, what people's motivations were when they were making them. And as Tim said, I'm now looking at children's culture, which is extremely political, as it turns out. And with that in mind, I'm going to tell you the story today of a child, a boy called Marco, who's from Colombia and was born there in 1920 in a tiny village called Santuario. Now, Santuario is at the foot of the Andes in the coffee growing region. And Marco's born into a coffee growing family. And unfortunately, his story has a sad beginning because when he's 4, his father dies. And so his mother has to bring up her 3 young children on her own. She does get some help from family members. But Marco, this affects his upbringing really and his life because he can't complete his schooling. He only manages to do 5 years in total, off and on, alternating between periods of work, up until the age of 15, when the wider family steps in and says, you have to work full time now. So he gets some farm work, he's given room and board, not really going anywhere with his life, until one family member decides to give him his own coffee lot. So this and says that you can use this, the proceeds from your harvesting of this coffee are yours. So this today is what we would call a micro lot. This would be, anyone who likes their coffee, this would be a coffee dream. This is single origin Colombian coffee. It's grown organically, it's harvested by hand, the beans are laid out in the sun to dry for weeks on end. But obviously for Marco at 15, 1935, this is a lifeline. He's able to fend for himself and he has just a little bit of money left over. So most weeks he can go down into the town and he buys a children's magazine called Billiken. Now, it's quite hard to get this magazine. The magazine seller has to bring all his wares in by mule because there are no roads at this time. And Marco doesn't always have the money to buy it. And this magazine is a children's magazine. He's a little bit old at 15 for it, but bearing in mind the magazine is for school children and he hasn't finished his schooling. And the only person responsible for his schooling is him at this point. He buys the magazine, reads it, learns from it. He learns all about history and geography, and he reads inspiring tales of Latin America's great men, because it's always the men in the stories. There's the occasional wife or daughter of great man that crops up, but generally the men. And he also reads at the bottom of each page these little moral messages, and he takes them to heart. And his favourite one is a message that says something like, La vida más ocupada es la menos infeliz, which is a really complicated way of basically saying a busy life is a happy life. And the way that Marco tells a story of his life, he takes that message and everything he reads in Billiken and he uses it to transport himself off into a better life. So I've told you so far about Marco from Colombia, but my research is on Argentina, and Billiken is, in fact, an Argentinian children's magazine. And it's the world's longest running children's magazine. It's never missed a week's publication since November 1919. And it was sold in Colombia because the founder of this magazine, Constancio Vigil, he had a dream of pan-Latin Americanism. This is a political idea that the peoples of Spanish-speaking Latin America are one people and they are united linguistically and spiritually, and they are divided by national boundaries. So he thought, what better way to get this message across than to sell his magazine, his children's magazine, to different Latin American countries and to plant the seed of Pan-Americanism in the future generations, plant that seed in children, because children's culture is political. It's a short-lived experiment, but somebody like Marco is the result of that, somebody who grows up knowing more about Argentine history than he does about the history of his own country. What really interests my research is the contrast that develops between Marco in his tiny Andean village reading this magazine and Buenos Aires, the capital of Argentina, where the magazine is published. Buenos Aires in 1935 is a cosmopolitan metropolis. It's been absolutely transformed by generations of immigrants from Europe, to the point that Borges, Argentina's most famous writer, said that the Argentine is an Italian who speaks Spanish, thinks in French, and would like to be English. And these are really the kinds of people who are buying the magazine for their children. These are the success stories, the people, the father's in work, the child is in school, and the magazine is a way into Argentina's emerging modernity. It's got the latest graphic design techniques, it's bringing stories in from Europe, it's working with the best Latin American illustrators, it's entertaining children, it's educating them, it's advertising to them as well, creating the next generation of consumers. And the flip side of this is that the other side of Buenos Aires is it's a city of dangerous factory work, of child labour, of crowded tenement living, of broken dreams of immigrant families who'd come over wanting a better life and not finding it. And that contrast creates a tension in the way that Billiken is viewed. It's viewed as the preserve of a conservative middle class. And when I go to Argentina, which is quite often, because I do research there, I talk to people about Billiken. That's not really the main focus of my research, because I'm an archival researcher. I'm looking at the text. I've got nearly 100 years of this children's magazine to get through, digitised, thankfully, thanks to my wonderful research assistant. But I go often and I occasionally get to talk to somebody in the offices of Billiken. I also go because I had the very good sense to marry an Argentinian. Now, this is great advice. If you want to do archival research in a far-flung country, get a mother-in-law who can act as the unpaid research assistant. You can phone up and say, would you mind just popping down to the National Library because I forgot to get something and could you photocopy it for me? So anyway, my mother-in-law, Carmen, she's great. And she's a generation or so younger than Marco. So she has a lot of friends who were brought up reading Billiken. And they always want to hear about my research, and they have these lovely fond memories of it. And they say, Billiken came out on a Monday. It was the best day of the week. And I know it was a Monday because I remember my father would buy it for me on his way home from work, and he'd bring it for me. So it's that image of the middle-class family in Buenos Aires, of the father coming home from work, which contrasts with Marco. No father to buy it for him, buying it because he wants to educate himself, earning the money to buy it for himself. So Marco is now 96 years old. He's looking back on his busy and happy life, surrounded by his children and his grandchildren. And Marco stopped growing coffee, and first he went to work for a shoemaker, and then he became a shoemaker, and then he opened his own shop. And parallel to that, he had a very nice career in public service, in being a trade union leader and working in local government. And he and his late wife had 7 children, and they had 11 grandchildren. And one of the granddaughters is currently studying at the University of Buenos Aires. This is how I got to know about Marco, because when her mother, so Marco's daughter, came to visit Buenos Aires, she just had to drop in at the offices of Billiken. She just had to see this place where they were still making this magazine that had meant so much to her father's life, that had transformed his life the way he tells it. And that's the only reason we know about Marco now. So obviously Marco is quite a remarkable man, and he's had such a successful life because of the hard work he's put into it, because of the decisions he's made. But I do like the story he tells about his life, this narrative he's created about his childhood experiences with popular culture. Because I have a story as well that I like to tell people about how popular culture changed my life. And that's when I was 8 or 9 or so, my parents took me to see the musical Evita here in Sheffield at the City Hall. And that was the moment I thought, one day I am going to go to Argentina. So if I wanted to, I could trace every personal and professional decision back to that moment. Going to Argentina when I was 18 to teach English, doing a Spanish degree, meeting and marrying my lovely Argentinian, doing a PhD on Argentine radio drama, talking to you today about Billiken magazine and Marco. It's all thanks to Tim Rice and Andrew Lloyd Webber. And don't cry for me, Argentina. So when I'm 96 and in my nursing home, I hope that I'm going to be surrounded by my children and my grandchildren, and I'm going to be telling them all about Evita and Argentine radio drama and Billiken magazine. And what I'll be telling them is my own personal history of popular culture in Latin America. Thank you.